Did you ask us for our Halloween Horror Nights 2023 house rankings? No? Well, you're going to hear about it anyways. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Universal show. I am Craig Williams. I am joined alongside by my co-host, Rhino.
Hello.
Oh, sorry. I didn't realize I was joined by a good guy today. Should I be calling you Chucky instead?
I want to play.
No, thank you. I'm okay. So it's the least creepy thing I've experienced since meeting David S. Pumpkins at Halloween Horror Nights, except that's a lie because I didn't get to meet him.
I was just going to say, when did you meet him?
I didn't. So I'll get into that in just a second, but wanted to let everyone know, yes, we are going to give you our 2023 house rankings for Halloween Horror Nights here in Orlando. We were lucky enough to be invited by Universal Orlando on opening night, so we could experience all the houses through an RIP tour, and of course also have the opportunity to film and take photos inside the houses. So that's why we have all the footage that you will see if you're watching this, and if you're listening, we hope we do a good job at describing our feelings for you. And, you know, of course, too, we also are frequent fear pass holders. So Rhino got a lot more use out of his pass than I did out of mine. Unfortunately, I apparently am cursed with whatever the first night of Halloween Horror Nights is. I always end up like really bad off. You know, the one year I ended up with pneumonia and blood clots in my lungs. I mean, that obviously was a long time coming, but after this one, I ended up with a massive 48-hour bug where I just could barely function, had a headache, had a bad fever, but I kicked it. I'm better now. But man,
you sure you didn't have a concussion?
Ride. Well, so,
those are also signs of a concussion.
Well, I mean, I might have, but probably didn't help that I barely got any sleep the night after Halloween Horror Nights. I mean, you're supposed to stay awake with a concussion. It's going to be fine. It's going to be okay. Yeah. It's going to be all fine. You know, it's unfortunately all the other symptoms, you're never going to be able to tell if I have them because I just don't know how to speak properly and I've never functioned like a normal human. So yes, we were invited by Universal Orlando the very first night, and everything after that, you know, now we are going to be talking about it from the experience of frequent Fear Pass holders. And with that, I will also say that this is brought to you not only by Universal Orlando inviting us, but Dreams Unlimited Travel. If you like our content, you want to support us, book a vacation through Dreams Unlimited Travel. Get a free no obligation quote today at dreamsunlimitedtravel.com. Rhino, did you have a chance to go through most of the houses a second time?
No.
Okay.
I went through one house 2 more times. So, and then, but the second night I did, I think 3 houses and only 2 houses the next night.
Yeah, I mean, the big story of the weekend is not the weekend. That was last year, but it was insanely busy. Like I was not upset when I was watching from home, seeing the wait times. I mean, obviously we saw them on Friday night while we were there, watching them on Saturday night, watching them again on Sunday. Like I want to be there more than anything, but my God, it seemed like a lose-lose situation. You lost if you didn't buy Express, and you also lost if you bought Express. Like the only way to navigate Halloween Horror Nights in the first weekend was by doing an RIP tour, which I hope that doesn't, continue to be the trend. Granted, it was Labor Day weekend, so you have to add that into the entire mix. But if it's a sign of what's to come, then this year is going to be more about enjoying the ambiance of the event than necessarily doing the houses. Besides, stay and scream. But, well, since you don't really have a lot to share on that front, I mean, now I have to ask you, did you see David S. Pumpkins?
No, I tried. I did go back to the bar again to see if he was back there because he's back at the Peacock Bar that's at the end of San Francisco as you're going into the Diagon Alley area, and he was not there. I did not see the show either, Nightmare Fuel, and I did do Stay and Scream one night, and then another night I went right after Stay and Scream ended, and I have things to say about both of those nights.
Well, let me share with you Nightmare Fuel. There was fire, there was dreaming, contortionists, I didn't see the show either yet. Obviously, by the time our tour ended on Friday night, we were already past the last showing, so we didn't have a chance to see it. And I've already explained my story, but I mean, we know based on the previous years that that's what usually goes into that show. And if anything, follows like last year, I'm sure it's better than the previous version of the show. But do you want to just jump into our house rankings then? Since we'll let the other conversation come naturally, but we can jump right into the content that people are potentially here for, or just fell into accidentally.
Yeah, that's fine because yeah.
Let's jump into our house rankings. Rhino, do you want to kick it off for me?
Yeah, going top to bottom, or bottom to top, right?
Yep.
So,
that's how we always do it.
So here, I feel like, yeah, I know. I feel like I want to say that for me, I don't really think there's a bad house this year. Not that I would ever, I hate using the word bad house. They're all art. Art is subjective. So everybody's going to feel differently about different houses. People are afraid of different things. But I got to say, this year, I felt like all the houses were good. Like, I didn't leave that event thinking like, oh, I'm not going to, maybe I'll do that one more time and that'll be it. So when I say like bottom to the top, I don't mean any disregard. It's just a personal preference. But for me, I'm starting off here at the bottom with Chucky kill count. I said, I really enjoyed the use of it was a puppet house, essentially. They had a ton of Chucky dolls in there. I feel like the only thing is like, the benefit of when we get to do these like media nights or the media night that we did, the experience we had like specifically with an RIP tour, but then also in the event that we were in before that is listening to Universal creative people to kind of really talk about the stories of the houses over and over. You've written articles on uofan.com. And then we had the RIP tour guide tell us that. So like, I feel like we go in and we're extra cued into what the story is. And I feel like even with that, I felt like they were going for this like meta concept where you're going through this house where you're going through the TV show, which is on Sci-Fi. And then Universal decides they're going to make a house based on this. And then Chucky sees the house and he's like, not enough people are dying. So he starts killing people in the house. So like, it has this really cool meta concept that I'm not sure had I gone in as a regular person, I 100% would have gotten it. But I did enjoy the house.
Okay. I mean, fair enough. I ultimately think it's actually ironic that you cited the story being the reason why you put that in number 10, because that's the reason why I put my number 10 house in the spot I did, and that was The Last of Us. And the wild part about it is I don't feel like it's that hard of a story to figure out. I mean, it's obviously Joel and Ellie entering the Pittsburgh zone, and it's right in the middle of the game The Last of Us. You have your infected, you have clickers, you have like all of those different creatures that you either know from playing the game, which I did not do, I still never made it around to it, or even you kind of get clued in from what they look like from watching the show. Obviously plot points differ just slightly, but ultimately I just felt like it really was like just a glimpse and glimmer of a moment that the hard part is watching the TV show version of it. It was such a moving narrative that I didn't feel like any of that narrative translated over into the house. So maybe it is like one of those things where you have to play the video game to truly understand, or if you played the game, it made you feel exactly like you were living in it. But for me, I was just like, oh, it's just another post-apocalyptic house with, mushroom people taking over, which felt very much like the one house last year that felt like it was supposed to be The Last of Us and ended up not being. And you know what? It was still a beautiful house. Like, I mean, depressing to look around, but it just it didn't hit for me. I was just like, oh, it started and then it ended, and that was it.
So for number 9, I actually have The Darkest Deal, which I know is a lot of people's like really popular house. And if you're not familiar, I don't know, should I be reading the descriptions of these houses as I go through or something?
Nah, they know it by now.
Okay. So The Darkest Deal, just to refresh your memory, is the one that's about like basically, having watched Supernatural, I know it's not a supernatural house, but on Supernatural, crossroad demons are a big deal on that show repeatedly. And so this is their story on Supernatural is very similar to the story of this house, which I love. And it's basically a musician, or a young musician, wants to become famous and successful, and they sell their soul to the demon, and eventually the demon, the bill comes due, which is your soul. So I thought I had like a really cool story, really cool sets, but like I was editing the video or blog of it on throughout Friday when we got home, and Saturday, and when I was replaying it, I think maybe we had like kind of a bare, like maybe we went through on like a cash change or something. I don't remember necessarily really specific parts, except for one when basically the singer is getting his like soul taken from him. That was cool. But it's one of those houses where I was like, I'd really like to go through it again, with my own eyes, kind of a thing, and see how it compares, because everybody like raved about this one. And again, it was really cool. The set design is great. The characters that were in there really committed to it. So I'm excited to do this one again, especially because it had corn.
Yeah.
It's a house with corn in it. I know that's a big deal.
Well, we had two complete different experiences in there. You thought there was a cast change. I felt like I hit every single part of it. I'll talk about that when I get to it. My number 9 is Blood Moon Dark Offerings. And ultimately, this colonial cult that is, offering up sacrifices and will sacrifice anyone who doesn't join them. To me, it was a beautiful design, and as good as a colonial style house can be that is surrounding a cult. It was like very red and dark and brown and brooding, and I love that you could see the blood moon in the sky, and it worked on multiple levels. It actually took me a while to see, in some instances, the second level that was playing out, and that's why you got to do these houses more than once. But for me, it just felt like it was repetitive in terms of it was the same scares happening over and over again, like disgusting colonial person, disgusting cultish colonial person. I mean, all the same in there. And, it just felt like I was waiting for that different scare to pop out, but it was always the same exact thing. And I guess that's what you get when you have a cult. But even with something like Oddfellows, where you have this like demented circus that's happening, eventually in that story, which we'll talk about when one of us gets there, you start seeing creatures that aren't just clowns. So even in a house that's like, it should be all clowns, you start seeing things that aren't. This one, I felt like I just wanted something else a little different, and I never got it. But again, in terms of scenic design, this one was pretty impressive.
Well, my number 8 is The Last of Us. I said, it was a great set design. I said it was a fairly easy thing to follow, not really knowing the plot, I think, but almost like too basic. I wrote here, like, I have an asterisk at the top of this list too, where I was like, these rankings are definitely going to change. And the kind of the only reason, like The Last of Us, I debated being like a little bit lower, and the only reason I feel like I didn't put it a little bit lower was just because, like, watching the video back, it does have like a really great like set design everywhere throughout the house, and like cool costumes and things. But I am with you. I think you said it a second ago. If not, we talked about it, but it didn't have like a punctuating like finale for me.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where the part where I was like, oh, and then I think you were also the one, it was either you or our friend Ken told me, where you were like, well, it's just one level of the game. It must've been you, but I guess I just lost that somewhere, where I thought it was more of the story. So I was almost like worried it was going to spoil the end, because I'm not done with the show yet. I'm only on like the 5th or 6th episode. And so, so I just, oh, okay. So because I was like, that was the other part of it too. I was kind of like, looking back at it, I was just, that's it. It just felt, for me, my walkthrough, at least, it felt a little like,
I think Universal did a really good job of like nailing the point down that it's the video game, it's the video game, it's the video game. Honestly, I feel like the only benefit the show has is that it does introduce the characters as well as the different forms of the infected. But beyond that, it's just, it's two complete different things, even though it's one in the same. I mean, it's to me a good comparison would be like, oh, trying to say Resident Evil, the game, and Resident Evil, the first movie, are the same. It's just
No,
it's you
I
know
I think the show is closer to the game than that
it.
because the show is one of the first. The show is the example of why the direct adaptations work better when you're being closer to the source material, I think.
Yeah,
But
and I understand that it is in that way, but also as someone who watched the show and watched almost every episode twice, there was still a clear disconnect for me walking through the house.
mhm,
So it can't just be as easy as I didn't play the game, but I watched the show, so I'm good. There has to be some love of the game in there. And again, I knew this when it was first announced. I should have at least watched like the cutscenes. I should have watched YouTube playthroughs. I should have taken the time to play it. I didn't. I've never been on board with The Last of Us just because it's not my type of game that I ever played really. But
mhm,
now I'm regretting it. But maybe I'll play it and it'll up higher on my list later. But I don't know. I don't know. I'm torn. But my
yeah.
number 8 is Exorcist Believer, and
Mm.
this house is disgusting in every way. It smells disgusting. And honestly, their goal of being a living trailer for a movie that hasn't come out yet, I think was achieved perfectly. Like and in terms of someone who watches trailers a lot, it feels like a trailer as you're moving through because it's just hitting the highlights of showing the story and what's going to happen without giving away the ultimate twist. Maybe not. Who knows? It's a trailer. You always have to watch the movie and then be like, oh yeah, that was in the trailer. And that's all fine. It just something about it didn't completely again resonate with me. It was like I knew walking through I was in something of an Exorcist story. Like, it had that exact same vibe, which I mean, that's great considering it's a sequel to the original. I'm glad it was able to find that right balance. But yeah, it was towards the end of our night when we got to do it, and I think I might have just been, emotionally exhausted by some of the more high points at that point with it. So this one could jump up, but man, that smell will not get out of my nose. That's for sure.
It's funny because The Exorcist Believer is my number 7 house. So I wrote that I thought they were selling themselves short calling it a trailer house. I mean, I feel like all the houses in essence are kind of like trailer houses, but I guess they're telling you like the complete story. Whereas this, you're right. Like I don't know that I went through the house and I don't know that I saw anything necessarily that I'd be like, well, that just ruined that part of the movie for me. Like if you've seen the trailer, you kind of know these like the character that's going to be in it being like Ellen Bernstein's character. Like the trailer that came out today as of recording this, the second one, I thought that gave more away the movie than this one did. In fact, like having been through the house and now seeing that second trailer, I like put two things together where I was like, okay, well, I think I'm imagining what part of the third act of this movie is going to be about. But I
Demons.
yeah, you got it, buddy. Possession. um it took me a while to get there, but I got there. But for me, it's a pretty big surprise of a house. Like I thought the original Exorcist house they did a couple of years back, I went to that one both here and in Hollywood, and it was interesting to go through those and then these because my friends who have gone through this house talked about how there's one part where you repeat a room. And I said, well, in the original concept for the original house, because so much of the movie took place in Reagan's room, is that they like you're going through at different scenes. And I said, I don't know, because my friend seems to think that you're like dead in the end of the house or whatever. And I was like, I don't think so. I think we're just going through a different scene or something. So I think I look forward to going through it again. It smelled like poop, and I don't care for that. But
Yeah.
I was very surprised. I thought this was probably going to be my like least favorite house, but I thought in terms of like scares and a good Halloween Horror Nights house, it's really solid. And I have a feeling it could go like further up. Having once we've seen the accompanying material. Not that that's required, but I think you can still go through and enjoy it.
We will see. My number 7, Stranger Things. And honestly, the reason why it's so low is because of the second half of this house. The first half of this house is awesome. From the outside of the trailer with Eddie and Chrissy, it is just like it hits it right away. And honestly, it keeps going for a while. Then once it gets into the lab and you have all those scenes with Eleven and the transition, like it tells the story of Vecna getting to where Vecna is. But then you get to Vecna and it's just like he's constantly there. He's not really quite scary. And honestly, the biggest problem I have with it is there's so many big wide open scenes, but there's a lot of empty space that's not filled. Specifically when Eddie and Dustin are, fighting off the demobats, whatever they're called. Rhino, I know you would know more with me.
They
it's
are
just
called
like
demobats.
you literally see where the screen starts and ends, and it takes me out of it completely. And the same thing to an extent goes with when you're in the house, but in Vecna's house, and you see all the way through the portal and Max floating. Like, I get how they had to accomplish that effect, but to me it just felt like it felt empty. It felt empty. Yeah, it's not an insult, it's just how they had to achieve it. Maybe more fog would have helped. It also might have screwed people up in terms of where to go, because that actually happened to me. But yeah, it just the first half was so strong, and then the second half to me just kind of fell apart as it became more and more about Vecna and turned into a Vecna boogaloo. But that first half, totally have a lot to love about it. And I do love that they included Eddie getting just destroyed by the bats. So that was a nice little touch in there.
Yeah, just a note of that Stranger Things house is that I realized that when I was talking with friends when we went through it again, is that I didn't think I realized at first. Whatever. Humble brag. Is it's only following the people in Hawkins, so it's just the Hawkins storyline, and I don't know. I'll get to that when I have my thoughts on that. But my my number 6 house for me, that's what we're on, right? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Yeah, is Dueling Dragons: Choose Thy Fate. I thought this was a really cool house with some beautiful set, a cool story. I love the idea that they took a story from a now gone attraction and really made it into this horror house, which I just think is so cool. I think there's really cool costume design in here too, because the fire people and the ice people have basically what look like in the video when I was rewatching it, those shirts that when you listen to music you can see the lights going up and down. But theirs are one's fire, one's ice, and I thought oh, that's a really cool costume piece to add this really mystical, magical sort of element to it. And I love the dragons and thing, and I was the only one in our group that chose the left path, because everybody was kind of going in line. And you can see it in our video too, is I literally hesitate for a second, because I was like, are they trying to tell me to go somewhere else? And I didn't realize, I know how they said it was going to have different endings, but I didn't realize, I guess in the moment I kind of either forgot or didn't process in my brain that I can pick a different hallway to go in. And so I went, and no one followed me. I think everybody thought I went the wrong way or something. And so I was literally the only person in this finale room that was so that made me extra scared. But it was cool because I was on the winning side that night, but I know it alters and changes and stuff. And so I look forward to going through this house again.
I was the one who was aggravatingly pushing you towards fire, because I wanted to go ice, because when I worked at Dragon Challenge, I always loved riding ice. I met my wife at the unload platform of Fireball, and it unfortunately was also the train I was on when part of the fiberglass broke off and shattered and almost just sprayed all over my face. So I have some bad memories with it. And ever since that point, I always became an ice guy. So I wanted to go ice, and I saw what happened with that. You chose the better path, but I'll talk more about that when I get to that at my point of the list. For my number 6, that's where I finally get to Chucky Ultimate Kill Count. And you know what? it was a dumb house, and the puppets were downright silly at points. The first animatronic Chucky, which, we learned is an animatronic, so they can have someone like puppeting it, but at the same time, if it just needs to run, it will run itself. I love that it has that. There's videos that kind of weave the story together. I felt like last year when this was Blumhouse, it was definitely like, you've got Freaky and now you've got the Black Phone, two separate things, where this still somehow managed to weave a narrative together through two different sections where you go outdoors. It was fun. It was silly. At no point was anyone ever going to scare me in this house. And it just didn't take itself too seriously. And that's where I put it a little higher than the others, because the others just had more expectations for me and didn't quite match them, where this I had low expectations for. And I kind of giggled my whole way through. And sometimes you just need that.
My number 5 house is Blood Moon Dark Offerings, which I have been affectionately calling Blood Moon Rising. But for a lot of the same reasons you said, it's a beautiful set design in there. It's a cool story. I think I'm partial to it also because when we were doing our event before our RIP tour, some of the creative people they mentioned Plymouth, Massachusetts, and Pilgrims. But then when I didn't do it again the next night, but when I was with my friend the next night, he said, "Did you read the sign? It said Parrish." And he said, "I'm from Parrish, New York." And so he seems to think it's New York, but I am positive they said it was supposed to be a New England town. And I thought they basically were like, it's Plymouth, Massachusetts or something. I don't know. I remember them saying something about that. So I'm excited to go through the house again a whole bunch. But when I was editing the video, it's kind of like what you said. It was a lot of red, which messes with my eyes after a while. But I think this will be like how the Dead Man's Pier last year, how that one kind of like just kept rising up because it was just like really beautiful. And I'm excited to get back in the house and see some more scares in there. So it's right in the middle right now, right at number 5.
My number 5 is Dr. Oddfellow's Twisted Origins. However, I want to state with my 5 through 1, these all I almost feel bad saying this is 5 through 1. To me, these are all like 1 through 3, maybe even, or like 1 through. They're all number 1.
It's not a rating.
It literally could bounce around. It could bounce around. Like it just depends on what I feel about them at the time. But like I watch back the video of Dr. Oddfellows and I'm blown away by it. But then I think about the other experiences I've had, and then it's like, bah, those were so good too. So unfortunately, honestly, it was between, for my number 5 and then my number 4, not to spoil it, it was between Dr. Oddfellow and Yeti. And even now, as I'm sitting here rambling, I'm going to go with Yeti for my number 5, actually. So pause, stop, rewind, reverse, Timothée Chalamet, Wonka, Yeti. So this is probably my favorite version they've done of Yeti yet, which, I mean, that says a lot because they've done it a couple times now. And I mean, I think now that I put it in this spot, it's actually kind of ironic because I feel like the two dumb fun houses are Yeti as well as Chucky. And so now I have them sandwiched right together. And also, you got to give props to Yeti Campground Kills because HHN Bear randomly popped up in there. Like, I didn't expect that at all. And then you saw him, right?
Oh,
did you not?
Yeah, I was yelling about it in the video.
Oh, I be honest, Rhino, I have not watched our vlog yet because
fun.
I'm not going into it. But anywho, there was a lot of Yetis through this thing. Just so many. I liked a lot of the effects that were in the house as well too. Like, it really made me feel like I was truly in a 50s wilderness campground. I didn't see the baby, but
I did.
Well, so Kylie pointed it out halfway, so like she watched the video and she's like, okay, perfect shot, you got it. And it's like, and then she's like, well, why didn't you look down? And I was like, I was looking in front of me. And
he's in
like,
my video too.
He's right. If you would have just looked down, you would have saw him. And I'm like, I'm tall, so I'm at a disadvantage. Like, I feel like most people, when I watched other friends that were there with us, and when I watched their like footage of it, I'm like realizing most people are carrying it like almost at their stomach levels and like really afraid, kind of like you are. So I just see everything from a higher perspective because I'm taller in person. But yeah, I wish I would have saw the baby. I'll see him eventually. The only part of this house that threw me off is that weird lake portion. It's just like a black floor with one body lying in the middle of it. Other than that, it's a solid house.
So my number 4 is Yeti Campground Kills. I said it was simple, but it had great scares, and I really like the set design as well. When I went through this house again, I definitely saw a lot more. I did realize the second time going through the house, I was like, oh. Yeah, I have the Yeti baby in the house because the lady who screamed about looking for her son
Billy,
Billy,
where's my
yeah,
boy Billy?
she jumped out right in front of me the second night, and then I realized because if you've watched my Halloween Horror Nights vlog video, do you see this boy come out with this stick, and he's like, "Mom, look what I found!" and starts poking something
And
with
it
a
comes
stick,
up
and
behind
a
him.
Yeti grabs him, and the thing he's poking is the baby Yeti.
Son of
So
a
yeah,
biscuit.
so
I
when
know
you
exactly. Yep. And that's why
yeah.
she said, like, oh, you had it. Because I have the video. He's like, look. And then, that
Yeah.
was terrible audio description.
I didn't realize that night. Like I didn't see him that night. And even when I edited the video, I don't even think I knew what he was poking with the stick. You could see it in the video, but I was like, oh, he's poking that thing on the ground. I don't know what it is. But the second night, because she had scared me just right, I was looking straight down and it's like a little Yeti covered in maggots. So,
Yeah.
also the Black Lake Park, maybe you missed the scare that was there. Because I thought I didn't see the bodies the first time, and I was looking out that way. I was like, oh, water. And there's a guy on the other side that jumps out and is just like, what the hell are those things? So that guy jumped out at me. He's in the video too, the one I did, because I think somebody in the comments was quoting the quote of it, or they could hear it. I can't remember if I edited him out or not because of the swear that I just said. So, but the second night, like he's scared me again. But when he scared me again, I like jumped backwards and really looked in the lake this time, and I was like, oh, there's bodies in here. I think
Yeah.
there's like at least 2. But I didn't see those the first night. But yeah, there's HHM bear. There's actually 2 bears. But I just thought it was good scares. Like the second night when I was able to do it again, there's one of these guys come from above.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that scares me more than the arms coming down above because I'm like, you can't see me.
Yeah.
How tall do you think I am? So I'm
I did
always
see
like, they're
that
gonna
guy.
slap me. So, but I liked the Frozen, the Yukon, the Yeti of the Yukon one too. But I enjoy a Yeti house. I don't know what it is. I think it's just such a simple, like Bigfoot in the woods camping. It's one of those where it's like, this is a really solid, just easy to follow house. Like I love it.
Yeah. We'll have to see what they come up with next as a Yeti. There's still
Space
plenty
Yeti.
of oversized. Don't give them any ideas. They got to start paying for that. Well, that leads to my number 4, which, believe it or not, I know you're going to be shocked by this. It's Dr. Oddfellow's Twisted Origins. You didn't see
Wow.
that coming. Didn't see that coming. So honestly, I adored this house, and I know I missed a lot of scares based on other videos I saw from it after, where I'm like, oh, that felt like there was a hole right there that I missed, and that was like, that would have been perfect for a scare. So I definitely, I didn't have the best run through of it, but the circus aesthetic was one of the best they've ever done with clowns in the circus, and that includes killer clowns. I thought the lighting in this house was so vibrant. Like the purples were shining, and yellows and reds. Like all the colors were just like working to set the entire mood for this house. Where it's like it's creepy, but at the same time, it felt terrorizing being in there, but also like you feel like you're having fun because they're bright colors too. It's really hard to describe, but I felt like in terms of the Dr. Oddfellow story, it fit its part, but at the same time too, I'm not sure if it like for most people that walk through the house, if they'll necessarily be like, oh, I now understand so much more about Dr. Oddfellow from the house. But, you and I have been talking about it. It really, you do get to see the progression in the story, especially with some of the creatures, because it starts out very clown heavy, but then you start to see the first blends of Zodiac creatures. And like that also, that's why it gets a big plus for me, because like, yeah, if it's just clowns all the way through, that could get repetitive like Blood Moon, but it really it starts varying up the scares a little bit. So many details in this house, and I'll be honest, like some of them I had my camera right on when Dr. Oddfellow was stuffing Jack in the box, and I mean, I'm looking right at it. I remember it distinctly, but I didn't piece together that was what was happening in the moment. So I know this house is filled with so many details, so many Easter eggs. It just shoots that repeatability up. I'm really a fan of this house.
Yeah, I'll have more to say about it in a little bit. But my number 3 is Universal Monsters Unmasked. I thought it had good scares. There were more monsters in here than I expected. Like, I knew the Invisible Man was going to be in it, and I don't know. I guess I thought it was just Phantom of the Opera, and that was it. And so, like, having the Hunchback be in there, but then also the kind of surprising one was like Jekyll and Hyde, the monster being in there. I thought that was a lot of fun, and I thought it's cool because for the last couple of years we've really had. I mean, it all started with that first Monsters house that had like the big, like had Frankenstein, the Bride, Wolfman, Dracula,
Hunchback.
and then was Hunchback in that one? Yeah, he was in that one too.
He was.
And then and then what was the next one? It was
Bride of Frankenstein Lives.
Bride of Frankenstein Lives, and then we got the one last year, which I really liked, which was like the Mummy versus the Wolfman, and Dracula's in that one as well. So now I feel like we're getting some more monsters are getting their time to shine, and having the Invisible Man in there I thought was really cool, and I liked what he looked like, and it kind of like it all made sense, and it was just one of those things where I was like, there are a lot of monsters here. Like, so I think that's a really good house. I've only had the chance to do it that one time, so I look forward to doing this one a lot more. I don't know if aesthetically it'll move. Obviously, there's not much more room for it to move, but I don't know that I'll take to it the same way I did the one last year, but I still enjoyed the house quite a bit. And so, like, in terms of how I felt like it went on that first night for me, Universal Monsters.
I'll have more to say about it when I get to it on my list. Maybe one or two things to say about it. I mean, we're getting to the end of the list, so there's not a lot left. And my number 3, well, it's not Universal Monsters. Number 3 for me is The Darkest Deal, which is why it's so wild for me that it's so low on your list. I understand your connection with Supernatural and being so attached to the stories they told on that show. To me, it is one of those stories like you've seen it before, you've heard it before. It's the deal with the devil. Like it's a tale as old as time, song as old as rhyme, but I expected this to be way lower on my list as we like talked about the houses leading up to the event. It just, it didn't sound great on paper, but this house had a serious vibe to it. And honestly, I thought this was one of the first houses that actually had like cohesive storytelling from start to finish. I mean, walking in through the cornfield, and the collector is literally having the deal signed, and right away you find out that the collector has that demonic presence to him. But you then immediately cut to inside the bar, where you see the performer for the first time start to really become himself, as they do this awesome lighting effect behind him where the demon takes over his body. And then, ultimately you see all these other parts of the South that just like, you have the creepy graveyards that feel something like straight out of like New Orleans, Mississippi, just that rural area where it's just weird things happen, especially in that time period they're going for with it. And I mean, literally the story wraps up almost perfectly at the end, where you walk back into that same bar and you have the performer at his height, and you see the collector take his soul from him, and then you see the aftermath where he takes all of our souls as you walk through that version of hell. And so, like, really, if you're talking about liking parts of HHM because of storytelling, I feel like this is one of the best examples they've ever done in saying, this is the story we want to tell, and we are going to make sure that it's not confusing at all. And yeah, I like the music. I liked the atmosphere. It worked for me. But hey,
Yeah,
didn't work for you. That's okay. I'm not going to force you to
no,
like it.
I think it's just again, these are only ranked on me having done them once and the experience that
Boo.
I had on that first night there. So I for sure am positive this house will go up on my list. There's no real question. It was just one of those that I didn't stick for me, my walkthrough as much as the other ones. But my number 2 house, I think, is also going to move on this list, and I don't think it's going up. I think it's going down, obviously. And for me, that is Stranger Things 4. I agree kind of a lot of what you said about it, but I feel like there were some pretty significantly missed opportunities. Like, I do understand it. To me, having gone through that second time, it like, this is the third time they done a Stranger Things house. I honestly think maybe the season 2 and 3 house, like, it was one house. I think that will probably end up being their best house. But this one, I feel like, missed the mark on some more iconic moments of the season. It's tough because it is the season, like, minute wise, is the longest season in the series. So I understand that it did feel to me a little bit like they might not have had it from the get-go. This might have been one that they got a little later in the game, so they did as much as they could. What is there is good. I liked it. I feel like there's a pretty big missed opportunity toward the end, though, with Eddie and Dustin on top of the camper in the Upside Down, because I feel like his guitar is sitting right there. I don't understand why this character doesn't hold the guitar.
Yeah.
And they don't play, but they're not playing Master of Puppets in there at all. So that could be why, like, maybe they only could do one or the other. And as far as like how much I thought I would hear running up that hill, it is the bare minimum. I feel like the amount that you could play without hitting a copyright. Like, it is literally like 3 bars of the song when you're in Vecna's mind, and then it plays as you literally walk out under the thing. But it's not the whole song, because I stood there for a second. It's literally just like the one, like 2 lines or something like that. So that kind of, it bummed me out a little bit. And I understand that stuff can be really expensive, but that's kind of, I don't know. I feel like of all things, I would have really enjoyed seeing the Max levitating scene. I, for 100%, assumed they were going to have just like a dummy, kind of like they do in the house. They do have the scene from the last episode in there. But there was just like, there was a couple of moments, like somebody pointed out to, they're like, there's no Argyle. And I was like, oh man, that there's I really, really, really thought they were going to have 11 hitting the girl in the skating rink with the nose. I felt like that was ripe for Halloween Horror Nights, like screaming, turning towards you, bloody face sort of a person. But then you're like, how do you design that room? You can't have people on roller skates all night, right? So, but it's just one of those things where I feel like there's some missed opportunities. Really enjoyed what was there, but it was easier to just really lean into just Vecna. And then there's like one appearance by each character just once, sort of, not even each character. Cause like Mike, Will, Jonathan, they're not in it. So Dustin's in it once, but technically, like, he's on the ceiling, so it's technically twice. But
here's the thing: when you make such an overinflated, bloated season of your TV series, they have only so much they can do to condense it down into a 6-minute experience. And
Yeah.
I do give them a lot of credit for it because on paper, like as you mentioned, 19 things, like, well, you can't fit all of those in the house and fit the moments that people want to see too. So I commend them for choosing what they did. But honestly, if you really want to pay tribute to that season in that way, like the only thing you can do is make an entire Stranger Things house event where you walk through the different episodes and handle it that way. But I also don't want to see it because I'm not that invested in the show. But that's something for like throw that in Atlanta somewhere.
They did.
Like,
There was like, this is like predating when I worked here, but 1 year there was like a Walking Dead house that was like the longest house they had ever made, and
I remember it.
It needed to be like a length of that, but that Walking Dead house, again, it was just like the zombies. So it was like, for me, it was like, this is so boring the whole way through. So
it was Walking Dead at its prime when it was like, you know what? We're going to make the whole event about it this year. And then we're going to make a whole event about it the next year. And you know what? You haven't had enough.
Yeah.
We're going to triple down on it. And I totally remember that. But
that actually was a big turnoff for me from the beginning, because I remember going and being like, okay, I did it, and then it was again, and I was like, oh, do they just do The Walking Dead all the time? Because I don't like doing that same thing over and over again. So that's what I feel like I was delayed getting into that because of Walking Dead. But whatever, I was right.
That
Walking
first
Dead
season
sucked.
was killer. It was killer. So good television. But my number 2 is Dueling Dragons, Choose Thy Fate. And I want to make it very clear. It's not because of my feelings of Dragon Challenge, Dueling Dragons. Honestly, I think that this is probably the prettiest house of the year overall. I mean, it's fully fleshed out. Like you walk in and it's in the one sound stage that starts with the banners. So like you don't know what you're going to see the first time, and you turn that corner and you see the giant enchanted oak, which I never got to see in person. I've only seen the pictures, but like it just, your jaw dropped right away. And then you move in and the lighting effects in the house, like Rhino undersold it by saying, it's like the shirts that light up and stuff. I mean, it is encapsulating this house between fire and ice, Blizzrock and Pyrock. And, it's not just them battling each other. You have other warriors in the house. Merlin's obviously a part of it, as we've previously mentioned. And, you start getting through there. And again, I never got to see the queue, which is always going to be the bane of my existence. I've only seen it in videos. But like you start to like look at it and you're like, holy crap, I am walking through the queue again. Like, you walk up to where you would enter inside the castle, and it's like, it's right there in front of you. And to me, it feels like I'm back at Dragon Challenge, even though it was set up a little bit differently. And I have, since then, I've watched a video side by side of the Dueling Dragons queue with the house, and my God, did they nailed it. Like they got that look perfectly. And, obviously the dragons blowing their steam out there. I wanted to say smoke, but you can't. I guess you can blow ice smoke, right? Why not? But blowing steam out there, super fun ending. Getting to go through Choose Thy Fate, seeing how you come out. I want to soak up this house. I want to go on a lights on tour of it and just take in every little piece of it, because I'm sure there's stuff I missed in there. But for me, it's this thing. I don't think it's dropping out of my top 3. It's either going to be 1, 2, or 3 for me, unless like the scares start getting so terrible in there. But there was a lot, so I think it's a solid house. But your number 1, sir?
My number 1 is Dr. Oddfellow's Twisted Origin, set in the 1930s. For me, I am afraid of clowns, more or less. They just make me uncomfortable. And I am afraid of circuses. They just make me uncomfortable. And tight spaces. And they just make me uncomfortable. So there are 3 things working in this house's benefit here. And I will say this. I screamed like there was a moment that I got so scared that I screamed not like I normally scream, but like in a sitcom where like a stereotypical masculine character would scream in a very feminine way for the extra punchline unintentionally to the point where the team member was laughing at me in the corner. I was like, that's fine. That's fine. It's fine. Because there was one part where there was like a corner and I turned around to be like, oh, watch out for the corner and never turn around in the houses. They'll get you. So, but I thought this is, I didn't see it in the night. So the second night I did it, it was a big white tent and I was like, oh, I feel like it's a real missed opportunity to actually make it look like a circus tent. Well, guess what? On Sunday night, it had a projection on it that makes it look like a circus tent. So it like looks really cool when you're coming up to it in the line. When we did our thing, they brought us through the side area, so we didn't see the house from that perspective.
It always drives me nuts with whatever is in that tent in particular. There's always something on the facade. Last year with Bugs, it was the big giant billboard and set up. Yeah. But if you do the RIP tours, you come in from the backside because of how they bring you in. So you always miss out on it. So yeah, unless we get to go like, and if we have extra time and we get to go through the front of the house after we're done on that first night, like we always miss it. It's that mystery until the next night or the following night of like, what's it actually look like?
Yeah. It's funny you think because they know we'd be filming that you take us the other way, but I guess that's not their normal routine. So not knocking them at all, but yeah, no, I really enjoy it. I mean, with you, I know on the first night we walked out and like our friend turned to us and was basically like, I like the house. I'm just not sure that it told a story about anything. And I was like, oh yeah, I was like, maybe, but then each night, like I've done this one, each one of the nights so far. And honestly, it doesn't, I don't know if that matters enough for me, but like that it's so scary. And I've now since read about Dr. Oddfellow ad nauseum to the point where I'm like, okay, I wrote it all down in my notes here about where he starts and where he is on the journey here and where he was in terms of like all these scare zones, all the houses, but then also his history where he is in Halloween Horror Nights, because I had no idea who this was. And did you know that his first name is Rich?
I feel like I did. I don't know.
Because they called him Dr. Rich Oddfellow. And the last time he made an appearance at Halloween Horror Nights, it was 2000, I think is what they said in Fear House.
And we went through all of this when we did our episode on breaking down the scare zones and the original ones. But honestly, that was a long time ago now. It was weeks.
Right. So that's why I was like, and I was confused because all of them take place in a different decade. And I was like, is one of the decades missing? But one of the big things about the end of this house that's kind of cool is like, so in the house, like your soul gets like sacrificed to Dr. Oddfellow, and he basically, this house is about how he learns how to access the Zodiac dimension, or the Zodiac realm. I forget what the word they use, but and so like it ends in this like Zodiac thing. And then like there is a Zodiac scare zone too. So it's kind of cool that like they have that symmetry there. But I'm assuming we'll talk about scare zones and stuff like in another episode.
Yeah, like just because I mentioning some of this. I'm sorry. I would have liked to had it a part of this, but honestly, when we're doing that first night, we literally run through, and I just feel like I didn't get a firm grip on any of them. So I want to be able to give it a fair judgment, not judgment. I want to be able to discuss it and not sound like, oh yeah, there was some Zodiacs and there was hippies and that was all one scare zone. It wasn't.
But a couple of things to look for as you go through this house, though, is that like when there's some wanted posters, and Jack Schmidt is on one. There's a woman on another one, and she's in my video, but I can't remember who it
Jack
said.
Schmidt
right?
one's outside.
Yeah, the woman one is right as you go through the entrance, though, and I don't know if that's supposed to be chance or not. I didn't look back. I don't know what her story is either. So, but. There's like as soon as you walk in and you come around the corner. I mean, you talked about lighting and stuff like that. Like there's a flashing light, and if you look at the walls, there's like outlines of Jack, like the clown is there. I know people talk about the J, but there's like flashes of him through fabric in this house. So like it's not just that projection we get shoved in the box. So he is kind of like present and there. But I don't know. Like it's like what you said. This house is very colorful, very dynamic, very narrow, and there are a lot of like hanging drapes that you have to kind of go through. So it is like stressful for me. But my joke is always like, I see Dr. Oddfellow, and I'm like, yeah, if you keep scaring me, I'm gonna fall in love with you. So I feel like we're on our way.
Well, that's a great time for me to be uncomfortable. And I'll talk about my number one, which you could figure it out based on all the other houses we've talked about. And mine was Universal Monsters Unmasked. I think this is probably my favorite Universal Monsters house since the original one with all of the monsters. I think just like last year, it's a little sloppy on the story aspect of it. And I know there's probably people out there banging their heads saying, come on, will you give it up with the story stuff? No one cares. We just want to go and be scared. I like it. That's part of what's exciting for me is living that story night after night, just not walking through it over and over again. It's last year's was muddled, especially with it taking place over both coasts. This one, it makes sense from a perspective of like, you're starting up and you're going down into the tunnels, into the catacombs, popping up through the Paris Opera House, then going through the streets, and like you see the progression in how you change each location. So it makes sense with how you're traveling through the house. Maybe the monster placement doesn't. I mean, there is so much Phantom, but it feels like so much is surrounded by being under the Opera House in the Phantom's lair. And then once you're in the Opera House with the Phantom, he's there too. Love the transition into the Invisible Man. I love how the Invisible Man, obviously they could just wrap him in the gauze, and that's an easy way to do it. However, I feel like they found clever ways to try to not always portray the Invisible Man as always having his wrapping perfectly done. So I enjoyed seeing him in the house. Plus he's right up there with the monster, and the bride is my favorite one. Some days the Invisible Man is number one. I mean, Claude Rains, come on, forget about it.
The Invisible Man.
Correct Amundo there, sir. But then obviously Jekyll and Hyde. Like, when do you ever expect to get them as part of a monster's house? It feels like I'm not saying it's a stretch, but I'm happy to see them there. But I mean, the Hunchback steals the show with his little bungee down over top of you. Love a good bungee in a house, and just having the ending with them coming from all sides. These are monsters that are not A-list monsters, arguably, besides the Invisible Man. I know some people would say Phantom, but then you start getting into like, okay, well, technically the Phantom that Universal pushes is the 1940s Phantom versus the one that everyone thinks about, the famous clip from Universal with Lon Chaney Sr. That's the Phantom people recognize. So it starts getting muddied. But this is Universal's take on the classic monsters, their modern take on the classic monsters, which still makes you just rip your hair out wondering, like, you understand, maybe the Universal Pictures hire the people creating these mazes for HHN that keep killing it year after year, and have them come up with ideas and designs for the movies, because clearly they're fan favorites every year. So people still have a thirst for these monsters. They just want them done well. And I think Universal Monsters is just so well done this year. And, it's the Jekyll and Hyde in there. It's no Russell Crowe, but, it's hard for me. Russell Crowe will always be my Gladiator, not my Jekyll. But oh, that was number one. So, Ryan.
Was he Jekyll? He was Hyde. No? Yeah, he was Jekyll. You're right. I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
Hyde's the monster. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I also haven't watched that movie since the theaters. It's up on my shelf right up there, but will I ever watch it again? Probably.
I don't know. I mean, I actually did bring it up because my friend had never seen it, and I was we were talking about like sort of those like iconic movies that you hadn't seen, and I was like, that's the great thing about Halloween Horror Nights is it kind of ends up getting me to watch some of those. And I brought up that I had really enjoyed watching the American Werewolf in London movie, because I'd only ever seen American Werewolf in Paris. And I said, it's interesting because I feel like that's what The Mummy with Tom Cruise was trying to do with the Jake Johnson characters. They were trying to make it like the friend that was in American Werewolf in London, like how we always saw him. And then I was like, you know what? Maybe I should watch it again. But then I'll be like, remember how bad this was? And like, does Tom Cruise become Nosferatu at the end? It's not The Mummy. So I don't know. I don't get it.
I didn't mind it in theaters. I just don't ever need to see it again. And, I feel the same way about Benicio del Toro, Wolfman. I feel the same way, unfortunately, about
I like
Dracula Untold, which, that's Dracula Untold folds into this year because I always forget, like we talked with Exorcist Believer, when's the last time there's been a house that the movie hasn't come out yet. There was an Insidious part of one of the Blum houses that hadn't come out yet, and that was a teaser. But before that, the last time a full house was dedicated to a movie that hadn't been released yet was Dracula Untold. And yeah. Well, I also own that one too, but I got that one for $4.99.
I've never seen it. Never seen it.
You can borrow it. So you did give me back my House of 1,000 Corpses.
Yeah, I was just looking over here.
You did. So okay. I know, bring it up every time, but no, you gave that back to me. So you're allowed one more rental,
and I didn't even watch
Dracula
it.
Untold. Fantastic.
I had it for a year and I didn't watch it.
Yeah, that's how it goes with Rob Zombie. Sometimes you miss the only shots you don't get to take. But honestly, though, I don't want to say I was hesitant about getting my frequent fear pass, but I always feel that, like, what if I don't like the year in the houses? And I know I kind of had that feeling with it last year, but honestly, with the houses this year, I don't feel that at all. Am I still afraid of how busy the event is going to be? Obviously, yeah. That's a huge part of it. I'm really terrified that I'm not going to be able to enjoy these houses as much as I have done in previous years, but it's a solid lineup. I can't wait to see the scare zones more. I can't wait to see the Megan Horde, as much as I hate that movie. I think it's so dumb. I stop every time I'm scrolling on social media and I see a video of them dancing. It's always a different time and place, and I'm like, surely it will be slightly different. No, it's always the same. They creep me out. I'm like, are they wearing masks? No, masks. Are they wearing masks? No, they just like perfectly found all these girls that look exactly the same. Like I just want to see that in person. Mr. Pumpkins, the scare zones. I do want to see Nightmare Fuel, give it its fair shot too. It's a solid year. If you already have plans to come, you might be disappointed by the crowds, but you're not going to be disappointed by what's offered. And if you're still on the fence, honestly, I know it's probably going to be crazy this year. Give it a shot. I think this is going to be one that we're going to be talking about for a while.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this is really, I think my fear this year right now is that I'm not going to be able to experience the houses as many times as I want. And it's a
good problem to have.
I always think I end up there so many days. Like last year, it was like kind of a year for me. And I still feel like to the point where I was like, I'm here too often. And this year I'm like, I'm not going to be there enough.
We will get our days in the sun with our passes, and we will get there. We still have so much to cover too, beyond everything I just said. Obviously, we got to go back for the food. We've sampled some of it, but you know what? We need to try it at the booths
I've had a bunch.
The right way. Well, it's fine if you've had a bunch, but it's not official until you've had it.
Oh, no, I know. Me. I basically got it to know if I was going to hate it when we do it, because I was like, oh, am I going to? Don't worry, I didn't get the peanut butter burger. I tried and they were sold out by like an hour and a half into the event for the entire night. So that was gone.
Good to keep in mind, though. Yeah.
What?
That's good to keep in mind that
Oh
if you
yeah,
want it,
we
it
got to
sells
go
out
to that
early.
first.
Yeah.
And I did have another item. I'm not going to say what it was, but it was delicious. And so
Does it rhyme with schmitza pies?
it rhymes with barking loco. I don't know. That doesn't rhyme at all, actually.
I'm assuming something.
Walking.
I don't even know.
It's a walking taco. Jesus, I'll just say.
Oh, listen.
I had a vegan one.
Yeah, the vegan one, I had that at the Taste of Terror preview, and it's fine. But like
I
a
loved
walking, so the problem.
I love
is,
a walking taco.
and the problem is walking tacos were on the Pecos Bill menu for so long, and everyone slept on them. And you know what happened? They took it off.
Here's the thing. These are with Frito scoops. Scoops, baby.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's how it comes in the bag specifically with the Fritos, and then they just hop it off. It's a walk-in taco.
I don't know. When I was a kid, it was they always did nacho cheese Doritos.
Now, no, these ones, the Fritos now sells a specific bag that it's like it comes ready specifically for these walking tacos. It's marked right on the bag. So I do recommend those. And yeah, I would be willing to try it one more time for an official review, of course. But wow, we've gone well over an hour, bordering on the way to an hour and a half, unless I cut this down, which who knows? I mean, we definitely probably have room where it's like, do we need to repeat the same thing for the 19th time? I'm talking about myself. It's all okay. You know what? This is a long form podcast from now on. I think we're going to just start doing it late at night where we're, winding down and getting kind of mellow. You know what? We're always so overly aggressive with this. Let's just learn to chill out a little bit. We're talking Universal. We're talking fun. We're talking horror nights. It's going to be a good time. But not anymore for this week's episode. We are done with this Universal show. Thank you so much to everyone who took the time to watch us on YouTube. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, leave comments, questions, video suggestions in the comments section. If you are listening to this, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you can leave us a rating and review, that would help us out a ton. And then, of course, book a vacation through Dreams Unlimited Travel. Get a free no obligation quote today at dreamsunlimitedtravel.com. Rhino, thank you so much for having this conversation with me.
Oh, anytime. Halloween Horror Nights, anytime.
Stay spooky, Rhino.
You bet your sweet Bippy I will.
Okay. Thank you, everyone out there, again, for taking the time to listen and watch. Thank you to our amazing partners at Universal for having us out for the media night and getting the opportunity to shoot amazing footage inside the houses. It's truly an honor and something I look forward to every year. So thank you so much. And that's going to do it for this week's Universal show. Take care. Bye-bye. And we'll see you at Halloween Horror Nights.